Hey YouTube, Jonathan here, and for this video I'd like to wrap up our series looking at each individual country with this game of Axis and Allies Classic. So we are on country 5 out of 5, which means we are on the United States. Now, as the United States player, you have the most production of any country on the board, which is a good thing. On the other hand, you are the most far removed from the action, which, depending on how you look at it, it's maybe a good thing because it means you aren't threatened, but it can also take a little bit of time to really get into the fray. So let's look at a couple things. Because you go last, all the other countries go before you, and the map is going to look quite a bit different, more than likely, than what it looks like at the start of the game. But we're going to make a few assumptions, one of which is that Japan is going to do the standard move and they're going to go after the Hawaiian Islands over here, which gives us an interesting decision that we need to make. And it's going to be heavily influenced by how much Japan has over here. If they decided not to move their transports in because they wanted the transports to do other things, maybe we got lucky, we took out their sub and we took out one of the capital ships or a fighter. Hopefully we've done a little bit of damage, but what I'm about to describe is going to be influenced heavily by that situation, because we could, depending on what's here, if we have a decent chance of wiping out the Japanese fleet, yes, they took us out here at Pearl Harbor, but we could send a battleship and a transport down. Transport can take a free hit. We can get one of our fighters down here. And we can actually, all the way over here, we've got our other fighter off the Atlantic. We could go 1, 2, 3 and land in Hawaii. So both fighters could make it, our bomber could make it, our battleship and our transport for a hit can all make it. If we have a chance at wiping out the Japanese fleet, yes, they took out a big chunk of our fleet. Yes, we're probably going to take decent casualties, but is that going to result in the end of the Japanese fleet, aside from maybe a couple transports? If so, it might be worth it. If not, of course, you don't want to go on a suicide run, but just keep in mind that it's going to be very easy for the Japanese to move from Hawaii up here to take out that battleship and transport if if you just leave those there. And I don't believe, just looking at the map, that there's any route we could take that they couldn't chase us down if they really, really wanted to. If they bring a transport, it's possible that they could land in Pearl Harbor. That isn't a move that I normally see. I don't see a huge advantage to that, but certainly if they did have a transport with some units here that they could then use to cause trouble over here, that is something that we would want to be aware of. Now, if we want to go after Japan, which I don't think is as advantageous as other options, we could go defensive, plop down a carrier here. We would not be able to get these fighters non-combated over to that newly built carrier, but I believe that if we build both a carrier and fighters, as in terms of what we build on this turn, I think we can put them both there, so that would be a possibility. But when I used to play, I mainly would just focus on trying to hold Japan at bay, so if that means destroying their navy, then that might be enough. If they built more navy than over here, then I might need to build a little bit more navy just to counter it. But in most games that I've seen where the U.S. was like, I'm going to go after Japan, they ended up just kind of dancing around in the Pacific. These islands down here, compared to other games, aren't really worth a whole lot. One production, two production. What is the Philippines worth? Philippines is actually worth 3, but that's deep in here. Islands aren't really worth a whole lot for Japan. So that really didn't seem to make a whole lot of a difference. It only seemed to distract the United States. Not a whole lot we can do in China unless the other allies have all done something to really put the hurt on Japan. Then we might put a factory in Xingkang. Typically that isn't something that I see But if Japan's in a position where it's not able to move on China and doesn't look like it can move up from Indochina into Senkang on its second turn, that's something you might consider doing. You can build 2 units there, and you can help prevent the Japanese from moving in. Like I said, a possibility, probably not something that you're really going to want to count on, but if the situation presents itself, or the opportunity presents itself, you certainly could think about doing that. Now, as we move over here to the East Coast, if we don't need our bomber to destroy the Japanese fleet, we could easily move it up here to London. If England has built a carrier on its turn, we can get both fighters, I believe. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, both fighters of our fighters could land on it if we really wanted to. We could also build, of course, a carrier of our own over here. Now, depending on what kind of fleet England has, and generally you want to assume that it is not going to really have much of a fleet to speak of. If it does, then it's possible they might have moved their fleet here, and you could move your undefended transport over there because England will protect it. If England has adequate ships to do that, you could make that move on the first turn, drop off in Algeria. I know some people like to sacrifice their transport just to get units across here as quickly as possible. That isn't really a strategy I favor. I don't like wasting units where that can be avoided. And so what I would recommend is doing one of 2 things. You could either keep your transport here and just build up some more, or build up a surface fleet on the first turn. You could move the transport up here, so it could move over to Karelia if it wanted to. Granted, you aren't going to be able to get newly built ships here all the way up to Karelia, but you could piggyback on England. If you know England is going to move there next turn, then you could just follow them with your transport and be protected. You could also, depending on what's going on down here and how far Germany looks like it's going to be able to push, you could move your transport down here. That is going to be out of range of Germany's fighters up here, not fighters down here. You'll still want to look out for that bomber, but you'll be out of range of the fighters, and that gives you a larger range of territories that in Africa you could land in with that undefended transport. You could, either of these or that, or you could come up here. And that still gives you the option of circling back here to Western Europe if you want to, and you are out of range of Germany's fighters, so you could move your transport there. Ultimately, between you and England, you are going to need more surface ships. Not quite as many in other versions of this game because your transports can be taken as hits, and they do get to defend at a 1. So you aren't in as bad of shape, but you are going to need a surface fleet. And ultimately, you want to be in a position as quickly as possible where both fleets can operate independently, which means you'll be able to threaten more German territories because, let's say, something I've described a lot in the past is when you split up, you have America down here because it's a little easier for them to get to, and then you have England threatening the north and being able to shovel guys up over here because in terms of their position, it's easier for them to come up here. The U.S. They could get here or here, but then if you want them to reinforce, then they've got to move even further. So that's normally how I do it. You'll want to double up early on as you rebuild the fleets, and then as soon as you reasonably can, you want to split them up again and have them threaten Germany from opposite sides, while, of course, cleaning up North Africa as part of that. And that is my take as the United States in this game. You have the advantage in that you can see how events are unfolding, and you have plenty of time to think about how you want to react to those things. On the flip side, it's not as easy to prepare for your first turn as it is for, say, the Soviet Union or Germany, because there's a lot in the world that could change. Fortunately, because you are so far away from the action, you aren't going to be directly threatened. But there's a lot, that you have to think about, like what's going on with England, what kind of navy does it have, where is its navy, what does the Pacific look like, what has Japan done with its fleet, can we counterattack, is there a potential for a less orthodox move by industrializing China, or Xinjiang rather, the westernmost territory in the area of China. Who knows? That's something you'll want to keep an eye on. But that is my take on the United States. Any questions or comments, let me know. And I hope you enjoyed this video.